Hey, Carlos, this is Jason in IT. This is the general meeting, but I see you're sharing your screen. Is that correct? We usually start with you guys go to closed session and start the simple Zoom call, correct?
How are you? Nice to see you. It's like welcome everybody to the agenda of the City Council closed session and regular meeting of the City of Coachella. The council sitting as the Coachella Sanitary District, Coachella Fire Protection District, Coachella Financing Authority, Coachella Education and Government Access Cable Channel Corporation, Coachella Water Authority, and the successor agency to the redevelopment agency. June 22nd. It is 5:07. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order pursuant to Assembly Bill 36, along with Governor's State of Emergency Declaration issued on March 4th, 2020. This meeting will be conducted via teleconference. The meeting options will be either in person or via Zoom. Public comments may be received either in person, via email, telephonically, or via Zoom with a limit of 250 words or 3 minutes. The live stream of the meeting may be viewed online by accessing the city's website at coachella.org and clicking on the Watch Council Meeting tab located on the homepage and clicking on the live button. With that, I'm going to ask for a roll call.
Councilmember Beaman Jacinto,
Present.
Councilmember Delgado,
Present.
Councilmember Galarza. I don't see Councilmember Galarza online either. Mayor Pro Tem Gonzalez.
Mayor Pro Tem Gonzalez will be absent as she is injured. I am
Mayor,
here.
this is
All right, we'll move on now to virtual public meetings. This is resolution 2022-59. A resolution to continue for partially of meetings. What is the wishes of the city council? Thought I heard a
Move to
motion.
approve.
There's a motion
Second.
and there's a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion
Aye.
carries. We'll move now to approval of the agenda. At this time, the Council Board Corporation Authority. May I announce any items being pulled in the agenda. Mr. City Manager, any changes?
No changes, Mr. Mayor.
There are no changes. All right, can we get a motion to approve the agenda with no modifications?
Motion to approve.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. We'll move on now to public comments. Is there any public comments on the closed session items?
there are none.
Okay, we'll move on now to adjourn to closed session. At this point, the council will adjourn to closed session. And we should be back by 6 o'clock. Welcome, everybody. The council reconvenes from closed session. Mr. City Attorney.
Yes, Mayor.
Announcements.
City
Hear
Council,
you,
can
Carlos?
you hear me? Yes, Mayor. City Council meeting closed session items, B and C, on the closed session agenda. We did receive direction on the items, but no reportable actions were taken. Thank you.
Okay, with that, we will move on to our pledge of allegiance. And Andrew, can you lead us in the pledge?
Okay, ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America. And to the
and to the
republic
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
We'll move on now to recognition of Coachella Fire Department retiree Bonifacio de la Cruz. This is a proclamation that we have for Chief. Chief, what are you doing retiring, man? You look more than 41 years old, Chief. Look good.
Well, good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, Council, staff that's watching in the public at home. My name is Brian White. I'm the Fire Chief for the City of Coachella. It's my honor to be here tonight to talk about Chief De La Cruz and his pending retirement here in just a few short days. Before I do, I know that there's a proclamation this evening that you're awarding to him, and I just want to touch on a couple of the highlights. Chief De La Cruz has got roughly 38 years or so in the fire service. Started back in 1979 as a volunteer in the community of Mecca. So growing up in the fire service, so much more than just a fire leader to us in the fire department. He's a leader to the youth in the community. He's run the volunteer program, the reserve program, the Explorer program, and really helped bring up some of our young firefighters into the community and help them be successful and get a pathway into the fire service. So I appreciate the proclamation, and I don't want to steal all of his thunder, but I'll turn the microphone over to Chief De La Cruz.
Why don't we, if we could, maybe present the proclamation and then we'll hand you the floor, Chief. So let's do that. I'm going to do something that we used to do back in the day, and we'll do it again because you're pretty important, Chief. I'm going to allow each one of my colleagues to read a whereas. And this is a City of Coachella, California proclamation. And whereas Bonifacio de la Cruz began his career in 1979 as a volunteer firefighter in the community of Mecca, California, and
whereas as an FAE for 8 years, Bonifacio made the rounds working at various fire station assignments throughout the Coachella Valley. Along the way, he has trained many volunteer firefighters who are now career firefighters with CAL FIRE and other departments. And whereas beginning in March of 1998, he stepped up as a limited term fire captain for 3 seasons at the Bautista Conservation Camp and San Jacinto Station 25. His permanent fire captain tour began in the Emergency Command Center in Paris, California in September 2000. And
whereas Bonifacio returned to the Coachella Valley in 2003 as the fire captain of Mecca Fire Station, where he assisted with the implementation of its paramedic fire engine program, along with numerous community programs. And then in April 2012, he was promoted to the rank of battalion chief. And whereas Bonifacio is a Coachella Valley High School graduate and holds an electronics engineer technology degree, he has served on numerous department academies, cadres, and committees throughout the years, and is currently an adjunct faculty member at COD's Fire Technology Program.
And whereas as a battalion chief, Bonifacio oversees the day-to-day operations of 7 fire stations, including those in the contract cities of Coachella and La Quinta, In 2017, he was instrumental in helping the city of Coachella obtain a SAFER grant, which provided daily staffing of 4 firefighters on the city fire engine. Now therefore, I, Stephen A. Hernandez, the mayor of the city of Coachella, and the city council of the city of Coachella, by the powers vested in us, do hereby recognize Chief Bonifacio de la Cruz and urge all the citizens of the city of Coachella, in recognizing his many successes, and congratulate him on his retirement. Chief, this is for you. And the floor is yours and well deserved.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and council members. Quite an honor. I really didn't expect this, but it is very, very good to recognize, something like this. So it's been a very worthwhile and very rewarding career. I promoted here in 2012. At that time, I expected to stay maybe 3 or 4 years. Well, 10 years later, here I am. But we made lots of strides, a lot of positive progress, not only with our fire station, but also the entire area that serves around the city of Coachella. So it's quite an honor. I have lots of folks to thank for allowing me this opportunity. First of all, thank Almighty God for providing the opportunity and the strength and the wisdom and guidance to see it through. Of course, my parents, my family, and my late wife, who supported me through majority of my career. Without her, I wouldn't have been able to dedicate the time to the city and so forth. But I couldn't do it without my staff, my executive assistant Marissa here, as well as all of the members of the Coachella Fire Station. They've actually been very instrumental in making this program not only a success, but also a positive influence here in the city for the business owners and residents. So I'm very thankful for all that. Thank you very much.
Chief, we're really going to miss you and your leadership. It's been 16 years for myself, and you've been here a large majority of that time. And one of the things that I always appreciated of you is that you presented just a kind of a stoic approach to things. You never got really excited. You never got really low. You were always consistent and always wanting or always knew the mission at hand. And so every time we had a conversation, whether it was, obviously a new fire station or, wanting to add a fire engine, or in some cases when we had to cut a fire apparatus, you always gave us the pros and cons, and yet at the same time, when the decisions were made, you were very, very professional, and you did your duty. And so we are just grateful for what you have provided us as a community, and not only that, but you leave a great legacy with a lot of the gentlemen that you have serving. I know they hold you in high regard and high esteem, and I know you've done a good job of training a lot of folks, and so I'm just very, very proud of you and of them and of what we've accomplished. And you're local too. You grew up in Mecca, and you have a lot of family roots, a lot of folks in the community, and so I know that you've cared, and above all, I think that's what makes a good public servant, is someone who really cares to do the job and serve the people. And so, Coachella is better off because of you. We're not better off because you're leaving, but we're better off because of you and what you've done for us. But I know that you've left a great legacy, and Godspeed on your retirement, whatever it is that you choose to do. If you're here, or if you go to places unknown, or wherever that is, just know that Coachella and the eastern end of the Coachella Valley is home for you.
Thank you very much.
We'll move on now to written communications. Madam Clerk, are there any written communications?
We did receive a letter via email for comment on item number 19 from Stronghold Power Systems, Inc. And this letter was forwarded to council today at 1:41 PM.
We'll read it at that time. We'll move now on to the consent calendar. It is recommended that the consent items be acted upon simultaneously unless separate discussion or action is requested by the city council. What are the wishes of the city council?
Move to approve.
There's a motion to approve the consent calendar. Is there a second?
Second.
A second. Can we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Beaman Jacinto,
Yes.
Councilmember Delgado,
Yes.
Councilmember Galarza,
Aye.
Mayor Hernandez.
Aye. Move forward now on new business calendar. This is to authorize the city manager to execute an amendment of the library facilities use agreement between the city of Coachella and Desert College Community District.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. If you allow me, I'm going to share my screen to show the presentation on this item. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you. The city has had a facility use agreement. The first one, I think, was about 6 months. Then we had 2-year terms. We did have it since 2019. The last was a 2-year term and the proposed is a 2-year term. The facility use agreement is for the meeting rooms that are located inside the library in the lobby area that are not inside the county operated part of the library. They are the rooms identified in orange to the right of the screen. And the rooms have been a use for COD for them to offer college courses at the Coachella Library. The new agreement is because the current term of the current agreement is expiring June 30th. The new term would take on from where the prior is leaving off July 1st of this year through June 30th of 2024. The rental rate is the approved rental rate.
If you could hold on 1 second, I just realized that Carlos, I own property 500 feet from this unit, and it's an extension of the lease. Under abundance of caution, I'm going to abstain on this item. So I'm going to ask that Councilmember Beaman Jacinto go ahead and step in as the acting chair for this item.
Is everyone okay if I continue?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. The rental rate for the use by COD of the conference room would be the established rate that the city currently has, $29.50 per hour per room. Based on the proposed use, this is estimated to amount to $65,000 for an annual use based on the school term. COD will reimburse the city for the use, excluding, of course, holidays and days that are not in use for whatever circumstances that may arise. And COD will also reimburse the city for providing a security officer that is required during the hours, 1 hour before and 1 hour after the close of their classes. Their classes are expected to run from 5 to 10, Monday through Thursday. And annually, this cost is estimated at $55,000. And again, this is a pass-through cost as we do bill COD for this expense, and COD pays the amount that's owed. Last spring, just to give a quick snapshot as to what kind of courses are being offered by COD at the library. This last spring, you'll see that they offered English 1, History 18, and Political Science 1. Some introductory college courses that generally are some base courses for moving into a four-year college. And in the fall, they're offering the following: sociology, English, communication class, and a Spanish class. And with that, that does conclude my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions of the council. I'll stop my share.
I'm sorry, I didn't capture the hours. What are the hours Monday to Thursday?
Sure. The hours of the classes are 5 to 10.
So of
Yeah.
course, I enjoy that we have classes here. The only thing I don't like is that it takes up the only spaces that we have really for the community to use. And so that leaves only Friday and Saturday really. So that's my only objection to it. And then, I'm hoping that other spaces are considered in the future so that we can, open up these spaces to the community.
I think my comments are thanks staff and Desert Community College for creating these opportunities for our students, not having to drive, to Palm Desert or Indio or other places. Not only are Coachella residents beneficial to this, but also residents of Mecca, Thermal Oasis, and even the Salt Sea communities that who now can come here, where people come grocery shopping and all that good stuff. So I think it's a great use of our facilities, and wholeheartedly support this in any way that we can increase the use of our spaces for higher education and other education opportunities. And I'm on board. So in any other way, good future, still talk to COD about bringing on more and investing more in our communities, and we're with. So I'm 100% on board.
Any other questions or comments from council?
No.
Or do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, I'm gonna take
Roll call.
roll call. Councilmember Beaman Jacinto,
Yes.
Councilmember Delgado,
Yes.
Councilmember Galarza.
Aye.
All right, motion carries.
Can someone bring Mayor Hernandez back, please? Thank you.
All right, welcome. Welcome myself back. Going to item number 18. This is adopt resolution 2022-47, WA 2022-04, sanitary district 2022, FD 2022-03, CBL 2022-02, approving the annual budget and organizational structure for fiscal year 2022-23. City Manager.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. The item before you is the fiscal budget for the 2022-2023 year. Based from our previous council meeting study session on June 8th, the city manager is recommending this balanced budget for the general fund. The discretion items that were discussed during the council study session last 2 weeks ago have been included, except for the license plate reader and the city council chambers uplift. We are recommending 6 out of the 11 new positions that were requested by departments. And to bring you further details, I would like to call up our finance director to give you the specifics.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I want to go through some of the details, kind of following up on what we had discussed at the study session on June 8th. So starting back from the initial request budget, as we discussed, the department requests left the city with, we left a deficit of $978,000. This was after the departments put together everything that they needed to provide the services that they were tasked with. And then the revenue projections at that time stood at $31.6 million. That's where we started the process. If you look at the city manager recommended column, you'll see that at this point, the recommended budget would be at a would just simply be a balanced budget. There are two different components of how we address the deficit from the department requests. One was through revenue increases. During the study session, it had been pointed out that we were probably about $180,000 not covered by some items that the city manager had already decided to recommend were not included in the proposed budget. So the gap was closed with revenue increases. I had also discussed that we were reevaluating the sales tax increases due to the fact that we had just received May sales tax receipts. That would have increased our projections using the same methodology by $400,000. So we felt that it was conservative to just use $200,000 of that towards covering the difference rather than cutting items that we had discussed, and the remaining from cuts of $775,000. So that's kind of the basis point at where we're going. Try to go into some details. You wanted to kind of discuss revenue projections really briefly. I know we went into much more detail at the study session. All of the projected revenues here are based on conservative estimates. I mean, for example, the largest one, sales tax, we projected to be flat from 2022. So that was conservative from an 8% increase, which would have been the calculated increase. So just to kind of give you some guidance on it, instead of going into all the different aspects of the projections, I do want you to take, just kind of bring your attention to the historical context here. You'll see that in 2021, the budget, and then for 2021-22, our current fiscal year, the budget, and then also the estimated year end, you'll see that our revenues are increasing between the two. But if you look back to 2021 actual, you'll see that we were at 30.6 million. Our current projections are at 31.8 million, which is a $1.1 million or a 4% increase between those 2 years. So the COVID projections kind of got in the middle of that, but this is consistent with historically as well. So just looking at it from that perspective, the kind of in line with what we're seeing across the board on the revenue side. Obviously, the largest component of this is taxes, and we're seeing a $1.7 million increase in the taxes category. But if you again go back to the last actual, it's a roughly 2% increase of $500,000. A couple other of the larger increases, the largest component is obviously taxes, and then the other revenue had a lease payment from the water authority in there for $316,000 of the roughly $400,000 increase, and then transfers in increase because, for example, police and fire assessments increased. So that's the other components of revenue. All right. So then transitioning over to expenses. These were, so discretionary expenditures would be defined as expenditures that we could not do and still maintain the current level of service that was provided in the previous fiscal year. So at the study session, we did discuss discretionary items, this being the personnel additions, and we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. Then we had traffic and street condition studies, street striping, mobile reader boards. These are like the notices for construction sites, buying them rather than renting them, tree trimming increases, park repairs to shade structures, Sierra Vista Park restrooms, and facility uplifts to the senior center. This was roughly $145,000 higher when we were at the study set, or $245,000 higher because we took out the license plate readers and the uplift to this facility here in the recommended budget. So looking at the actual positions themselves, there were 11 positions requested by departments, and this is only recommending to council that we approve 6 of them. As we discussed at the study session, also all of these positions are positions that already have some aspect of city costs involved. So these are the discounted costs, except for the human resource department assistant 2. So you'll notice that these are the same position, the last 2, the department assistant 1 and 2. So it was 91,000 is the full rate, and then for the grants, part of this will be funded elsewhere outside of the general fund. So these are general fund costs. I do want to, and it's not necessarily part of this budget, but I do want to address, because we have had quite a bit of turnover, quite a bit of personnel rotating, positions changing. So this year, with all the different items that were brought to council, everything that we went through, there were a total of two positions that did not previously exist. There were 6 positions that were reconfigured. So you've seen a lot of positions, but 2 of them were true adds, just to kind of give you some context as to what this is in addition to. So the total proposed expenditure budget is for the general fund is $31.8 million. Of that, we had already discussed that 1.2 is the discretionary items that were listed. The remainder are non-discretionary, $2.3 million. Those are growth in police, fire, insurance, benefits, personnel, kind of across the board. So, so that's kind of the expenditure picture that we're incorporating into the proposed budget for the general fund. This brings us to the ending fund balance or fund balance picture. You'll see that we're projecting that we're going to start the year with a $25.3 million reserve fund balance in the general fund. Since it's a balanced budget, there won't be any increases to the unrestricted this year. And then that'll leave us with the same reserve position at the end. I do want to talk a little bit more about reserves closer to the end, but I do want to point out the committed position here. This is the city's fiscal reserve. That was a policy that was adopted in 2022. That is fully funded based on the previous year's projections. It'll need to be funded a little bit more as we go through this year, just because it's based on the actual expenditures of the year. But that piece is fully funded right now. And just the recommendations and the proposed budget would be different in climate that we're in if we were not fully funded here. So I just want council to be aware that the projections are, or the recommendations are based on this reserve position being fully funded. Council does have additional discretionary funds, this assigned category, which all the different pieces are lined out here. That is at the discretion of council. These are just what they're currently identified as needs for certain sales tax uncertainties we had discussed previously, certain staffing issues if we reorganize, that sort of thing. But that is at the discretion of council, and then council does have unrestricted unassigned funds of 3.7 million. So quite a bit of fund balance reserve, and that does play largely into how we're recommending the budget. All right, so that's general fund. Kind of went through that a little bit quickly because we did have the study session. Do want to talk about the water authority, which we've not talked about previously. Okay, so the water authority is funded from ratepayer charges. You will see that this year revenue projections, after discussions with the utility manager and kind of offsetting the growth in number of system users versus the actual, expected potential drought reductions in revenue, we kind of settled on a projection of just leaving it flat with the prior year. So that was the idea going into that. This leaves increases in operations of $513,000. And this is largely due to the energy costs was one component, large piece of it. Also have salary increases of $200,000 in there. And there is a utility truck, the ones that they use in the field. So the specialized utility truck holding inventory and field parts. So that is included. I do want to talk a little bit here about, there are two pieces, and we're kind of calling this out so that everybody understands. You'll see that there's a restricted and unrestricted net position. The unrestricted net position is the ratepayer portion of the fund. The remainder of the funds are from developers paying fees, impact fees into the fund. So those are the two different pieces flowing through here. So when I'm talking about operations, I'm talking about the ratepayer funded portions of the operations. The overall deficit is roughly $200,000 with the proposed budget the way it is. It is going to have a more significant effect on the unrestricted fund balance. You'll notice that it is decreasing by roughly $750,000. The proposed budget does include one additional personnel. This is a service worker one position. And I think it's an $88,000 add to the budget. City staff is currently in the process of looking at setting up a rate study and survey so that we can look at this. Obviously, the rates haven't been increased for 10 years. So this is something that we're certainly going to have to look into and address a little bit more. Didn't want to address it so much here in the budget because the operational needs of the utility, but something that we definitely need to look at in a little more detail as part of a comprehensive rate study. So moving on to sanitary. Okay, sanitary. There's slight trend down in revenues for sanitary for 2022. So we just conservatively looked at it, slightly trending down. Operation. So there are offsetting decreases in costs in this fund. So operations decreased by roughly $200,000 and admin by about $353,000. We're looking at transfers to the general fund being part of that decrease. They're calculated based on allocated overhead. So that did help out with that. And depreciation also was another huge component of the reduction here. So with the proposed, there are no new positions being proposed on this. So there were none requested, but at the same time as council, I think we've had brief discussions with council. There is a manpower study that was approved by council as part of negotiations. So the RFP for that should be going out relatively soon. So some of this is we're waiting a little bit on to see how the result of that study. So no new positions proposed here. This fund does have the position that it does have an accumulated negative net position, unrestricted. So that's ratepayers, ratepayer funded operations. So that is in the negative. Again, something that we need to look at, and we knew we needed to look at as part of a rate study. So we had started looking at this prior to doing the refunding of the water bonds. This had been brought up, but it did end up we didn't have enough time to fit in a full rate study before we did those. So we completed the water bonds and fortunately got that timed well with the market. And then this year, the plan is to go out for a rate study to analyze this situation right here. And rates have not been increased for, I want to say 6 years in the sewer utility. So again, cutting costs to a certain extent, but also keeping operations going, knowing that we'll need to come back and address that with a rate study. Fire protection district. Okay, so on the fire protection district, this kind of works as a pass-through in that the city is the only customer of the district. For members of the public that don't quite understand how how the flow through works on this, you'll see that the biggest piece of this is contract fire costs, which is the $3.1 to $3.6 million. So that does have a significant $500,000+ increase, which is an 18% increase. So that is a significant increase that the district is encountering. General fund does pay all the costs in excess of the district revenues, which that transfer is projected this year to be 2.3 million, slightly up $300,000 from last year. The $350,000 ending fund balance that you see here, this is the shared ladder truck between the city of Indio, county, and La Quinta. So this is the city's share, which the truck is in the process of being purchased, and it was approved by council as a separate item. It just hasn't happened yet. So we're carrying that balance there for the district. Otherwise it would just wash since the general fund is paying whatever's remaining. All right, so I did want to circle back to the overall economic and financial picture because I know there's quite a bit going on out there in the world of finance and the markets. I spent a little bit more time on the reserve position when we had the slide there, but suffice it to say, council does have a significant amount, $17.8 million in discretionary funds available to address any economic downturn. We are seeing turbulence in the markets. I mean, the stock market doing its thing. All the different markets are doing their thing right now as interest rates are moving, but those do not have, I mean, they're not directly attributable to the city's finances. What really is the underlying driver of city finances is consumer spending, i.e. sales taxes. And unemployment rates would certainly have an effect on that. So right now, there's a recession coming. I understand that. It's just that I do have to look at it from a different perspective. But there's the stock market, and then there's what affects the city. There certainly is potential for a recession in that the technical definition of recession is 2 months of negative GDP growth. But right now we're looking at GDP 6% up last year, 2% down the first quarter. So we are seeing it trend down, but again, that's still a 4% combined growth. So the financials are still going quite strong, the ones as they affect the city. So we might see some turbulence. I just don't see it being a major crash. So that is what this is predicated on. Again, we're holding revenues essentially flat. We're not projecting increases. So we are taking a conservative approach across the board. And then last point that I want to kind of bring to everyone's attention and emphasize is that this is all still an estimate. I mean, this is our best look at the picture right now of what we see going forward. We will be monitoring this on an ongoing basis and making adjustments accordingly as situations develop, as we always do. I mean, every year we have the mid-year adjustments. It's just simply an ongoing process. So this is the best estimate as of right now. At this point, if council wants to, the CIP presentation kind of just flows directly after this one. The city engineer will give that. So if council has comments on this part, I can address those now and then move on. Or
Council, do you have any comments?
I don't mind listening to the CIP and then we'll address further. Andrew, you smiled. Are you ready? Okay. Do you have
No, we can listen to the CIP. Andrew.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. I'm going to be presenting our capital improvement program portion of the budget. So to figure out how to work the mouse. There we go. Okay, so our CIP budget, this is the summary. Our total anticipated costs over the next 5 years, or potential project for the next 5 years, is upwards of $258 million. That includes some very large projects, Avenue 50 type interchanges. Most of those costs would be developer funded or grant funded. As far as this coming fiscal year, our sum of budget expenditures for this year, we are estimating about $27,766,000, and that's broken down among many different areas of the budget, such as facilities, parks, streets, landscape maintenance districts, sanitary, and water. As far as how we're paying for that entire $27 million, the largest two columns on there, you notice, are both grant columns. So grants and builder funds is approximately $11,222,000. And the second biggest item is the water operations and grants, which is $5.4 million. Overall, when you look at the 4 columns that account for different grants that are contributing, we have about $18.4 million in grant funds that are contributing to our total CIP projects, which comes out to about 66% of the funding coming through grants. So we do make a lot of effort to constantly apply for grants as we move forward with our CIP projects. I have a lot of slides, so I apologize for how many slides I have. I'm going to go through the projects kind of quickly. These are all projects that have been approved by council. They've been presented to council before. But I want to go through a lot of the projects, and if I'm going too quick, slow me down, but I'm going to try to go through these pretty quick. Any CIP project, obviously need to mention the Avenue 50 corridor. We do have 5 total projects on the Avenue 50 corridor, including potentially a new interchange at I-10, which is the extension of Avenue 50. One of the projects is also the bridge crossing to get Avenue 50 over the CV channel. We also have a new bridge proposed on Avenue 50 over the Whitewater River, which is right next to the SR 86 interchange, and a new freeway interchange at Avenue 50 and SR 86. And the 5th project is the Avenue 50 corridor widening, which will widen the streets and include landscapes and medians on Avenue 50 between Calhoun and Cesar Chavez. This is kind of the same projects, and just looking at it from the east end. And these are the kind of the big bridge projects that account for a lot of that budget. The I-10 interchange, that project is currently at about 90% design. It's very close to being shovel ready. So when development moves in that area, the city has worked with CVAG and worked with the developer in order to have shovel ready plans there, so that when development does move in that area, we are ready to move on that project. That project is directly tied to the Avenue 50 extension project. Currently, Avenue 50 dead ends at Fillmore Avenue. And we have recently completed acquiring the right-of-way needed for this portion of the project. So if Avenue 50 does extend through to the interchange, this would be the first bridge that we built over the avenue, over the irrigation canal, where Avenue 50 currently dead ends at Fillmore Avenue. As far as projects that are maybe a little closer to breaking ground, we do have the Avenue 50 bridge over the CVSC, that's the Coachella Valley Storm Channel, also Whitewater River. That project, City Council has already approved that for design, and we are about 50% done with design right now. So we are moving forward with the full design package. That project does have funding through the Highway Bridge Program for construction. So as soon as we are done with the design, that project would be looking to move forward with construction. So that is the first project that would be on this eastern part of the Avenue 50 corridor that would be looking to break ground. As far as the SR 86 Avenue 50 project, we are aggressively going for grants for that project. That's a high priority project for us to keep moving forward with, and we apply for multiple grants every year for that project. And as those projects come forward and as the grant opportunities come forward, we'll keep bringing those to City Council for approval and for discussion. The last project we have right now that's going on at Avenue 50 is the Avenue 50 widening project between Calhoun and Cesar Chavez. That project is also at 90% drawing, so it is, for all intents and purposes, ready for construction. The only thing that we are currently wrapping up right now is the acquisition of additional right-of-way near the intersection of Cesar Chavez and Avenue 50. So as we move forward with that project, as we move forward with that last stage, we do anticipate that project breaking ground in this fiscal year.
This fiscal year.
Yes.
This one, this ending, or this one, this beginning?
Well, not in the next week. So the one that's coming up,
All right.
the 22-23. So I wanted to go through all of the different sections of the CIP budget, kind of break them down, and cover some different projects that are in each area. The landscape and maintenance districts. The landscape and maintenance districts are kind of self-funded because those are through a special tax. So as we look at those projects, they're funded, they're self-funded through the tax that's collected for each district. And then as the funds build up, then we move forward with CIP projects. This is actually a change to the budget. LMDs used to be in a separate section, but we have moved them into the CIP section just so that we can track the projects with the rest of the CIP budget. So right now, some of the districts that we're looking to make improvements to are District 10, 13, 14, 33, and also 16. Projects are generally improving landscaping, improving retention basins, and making the aesthetic improvements needed in those neighborhoods. And then because that is separate, and that's a special tax, and that's funded separate, if you were to take that out of the overall budget, that would make our grant funding actually closer to 70% as far as how much we're actually getting for grants for reimbursement on the remainder of our projects. For parks, we actually have a lot going on with parks coming up in the next couple of years, or actually just coming up in this year. At the last city council meeting, I presented the Bagduma basketball court. So that will be going out to bid very soon. So, I mean, within the next couple city council meetings, I should be presenting an award package to move forward with that project. The next CBDG phase that we have will be the Bagduma Parks, restrooms and lighting. We'll be adding an additional bathroom over by the soccer fields and redoing the lighting around the fields as well. That project, we will be moving forward with the full design package this year. And then the construction would be in the following fiscal year. But that project starts this year because we have the full design package ready to go. A new project on our CIP list is the Central Park Avenue 52. This was a large grant project that I'm sure everyone is aware of. So we will be moving aggressively with that this year with all of the environmental and design and the community outreach efforts in order to get that project started so that we can make sure that we keep that project on track and meet the timelines needed to make that project a reality. As far as infrastructure improvements, these are the ST Street projects. The biggest project we have going on right now is obviously our Pueblo Viejo Sustainable Transportation Project, which is the improvements to the 5th Street Paseo, the Mario Lescano, the improvements to 6th Street, all of the landscape and lighting on the north side of 6th Street. And it also includes infill sidewalk in other parts of the city, including Pendleton Way, Vine, Shady Lane. And also this project will include bike lanes throughout the entire downtown area as well. So this is the same project. These pictures and these graphics have been presented to the council before. I did want to mention, this is not a CIP project, but I did want to mention it just because it is part of the Pueblo Viejo, is the addition on 6th Street for all of the improvements on the south side of 6th Street. With our project right now, we are doing the curb and gutter on the south side of 6th Street, and we're doing all of the asphalt. So we'll have a brand new road and a new curb and gutter. And then a developer is partnering with us on phase 2 in order to come in behind us and do all of the landscaping and lighting and sidewalk improvements and bollards on the south side of the street. So just to let you know, there is an additional $4.5 million that will be spent in our downtown area as a developer cooperation on that overall project, although that's not part of the CIP.
And just as an FYI, I don't think that's the official rendering of that project. So you should put the official rendering on it because I think
it has been modified. You are correct. This is an older rendering.
Yeah, it's a lot more attractive than that box there.
I'll make sure that next time I present that to city council, I'll have the official new rendering.
There's members of the community here. They just want to make sure that they see it.
Another new project on our list, we are calling Connecting Coachella. This is a proposal to expand on our urban greening class 1 bicycle lane that we just put in our downtown area. So our goal is to extend that bike lane from downtown over to Avenue 54, where we can tie in to the CV Link Trail, which is pending. And then also extend it north along Grapefruit Avenue, where we can tie in at Avenue 48 at the proposed arts and music line. So we are calling this project Connecting Coachella. And the goal is to have that class 1 bike lane connect the arts and music line, go right through our downtown and connect to the CV Link Trail. This project, we did just apply for an ATP grant. So I mean, we're seeking funding for this project. We also applied for a grant with the Coachella Valley Mountains Conservancy, and we did receive $200,000 in grant fundings to get this project started. So we will be moving forward with the preliminary design and environmental clearances this fiscal year. And if we get the ATP grants, obviously we move forward aggressively with the design and construction as well. Another project that we're hoping to break ground on this year. We're hoping to break ground on this one last year, but there have been some issues with right-of-way acquisition and getting permission from all the property owners on the county side. This is a joint project between the county and the city and CVAG to widen Avenue 48 between Van Buren and Dillon. The county is the lead on that project. So as soon as they square away the last couple construction easement issues that they need to break ground, we do anticipate this project moving this fiscal year. Other projects we do in the ST are maintenance projects. So this is just maintaining, obviously, things we already have: pavement preservation, slurry seal projects, pavement rehabilitation, asphalt overlays, and pedestrian and safety improvements, including improving crosswalks, medians, ADA ramps, sidewalks. And a lot of these projects, we always look at partnering opportunities. We've had multiple partnering opportunities with the county when we share jurisdiction on streets, potential partnerships with Indio when we share jurisdiction on streets, and then always partnering with CVAG when we can for the main corridor streets that qualify for CVAG reimbursement. One project that we are planning to break ground on very soon, we're calling the Pedestrian and Road Safety Project. This is a citywide project to take care of a lot of safety issues and pedestrian issues and striping issues throughout the entire city that have been brought to our attention over the years. It includes just a lot of medians, a lot of crosswalk improvements, a lot of ADA improvements, striping improvements. On the upper corner there, you can see where we would be redoing an intersection and installing ADA ramps, installing a median on Avenue 52. There are several medians like this proposed on Avenue 52, so we can improve those pedestrian movements and slow down the traffic on Avenue 52 by putting in those center medians and having that refuge for pedestrians when they're crossing the street. We really wanted to focus on areas where there's unprotected crosswalks, because those are particularly unsafe for pedestrians. So really trying to improve that safety. Another one that I've highlighted here is at Valley and Cesar Chavez. There's a school right there on Valley. So redoing the ADA ramps to make everything ADA compliant there, and putting flashing crosswalk signs like we have at the Bagduma crossing in order to improve that safety for children in the area. There's also lots of streets where we're going to be doing restriping to improve left-hand turn lanes, improve bike lanes, and just throughout the city. I think we have on Avenue 52, on Van Buren, and Avenue 51, and on Calhoun, we have just improvements to striping, including left-hand turn lanes, narrowing the lanes a little bit to help slow down traffic, including those bike lanes to increase the safety of both the pedestrians and the bikes and turning vehicles. For facilities, obviously the big facilities project, the only facilities project we have on our list for this year for the CIP is the fire station. I'll be talking to you about that at the next city council meeting, hopefully. So I don't want to go into a lot of detail on that because that's been discussed a lot. For utility projects, lot of utility projects all over town. Just to kind of highlight a couple, we do plan on doing a sewer main replacement project, a capacity enhancement project on Tyler between Avenue 53 and Avenue 54. That'll be one of the larger sewer projects that goes in this year. And Castro's water system, this is the mobile home park on Tyler. And we are replacing all of the water lines within that facility, putting in new water lines and new water meters in order to make sure that that whole community has good, safe, potable water.
So was this the engineer that said, this is our project? Just kind of brought this map. A lot of details.
I mean, the goal was not to go into a lot of details on individual projects, but any questions you have in the individual projects, I'm happy to answer them. Or projects related, obviously, to the overall budget as well.
I think for me, just on projects, I've been a big advocate for the last 10 years, 16 years here about ensuring that Coachella got its fair share of state, federal, county dollars, and I call it other people's monies. And, to know that, the $27 million of CIP, 60% of that is coming. And if you include the lighting and landscape district, 70% of that is coming from other people's monies and not the city general fund. And so I think it's been a healthy way for us to make improvements that our residents want and deserve, frankly. And so I'm just proud of the work that we have done as a staff, and it's consistent with year after year of seeing improvements here in the city of Coachella. And frankly, there's a bit of a culture now that has been established where we have been doing an excellent job of getting dollars, and people can see that their government is actually working. Case in point, downtown 6th Street is looking pretty good. New library. I particularly really like the improvements that were done out there on Avenue 53, and I know we need to get to Cochelita and do some improvements out there with the little park because it needs to be improved. You're really thinking about connectivity and mobility, but that's not to say that we can, that we're not missing things. It's just to say that we got a good way of going about building our city out, making those improvements, and I just commend staff for continuing the commitment to going after other people's monies and the relationships, frankly, that we've established throughout the years, where other agencies trust our work. Other agencies know that we can deliver. If they give Coachella money, Coachella will deliver for them, and that's really, really good on that side. I personally have made a commitment to try to get the Avenue 50 at the 86 funded. We do have a good opportunity. I'm hoping everything works out, and hopefully in the next few weeks we can have some good news with respect to trying to get the totality of that. What is like a $94 million CIP project, completely funded. Now, I do like the fact that we are continuing to say that despite not receiving the second half of that money on the first half, which is going over the channel, we're pretty much ready to go out for bid. And my only concern there is that I'm not sure if the federal highways over water channels is actually funded. So I'm hoping that $45 million that we had gotten an award for is actually funded. Or do you know if Coachella has gotten its allocation, or?
So you have to complete your PS&E before you can request funding for construction. And then when you request funding for construction, you then get put on the list. So as we move forward with the PSNE, we hope to have that done probably within the next 9 months, and then we will apply to get on the list. As far as, yes, currently the highway bridge program is oversubscribed. So the funding is guaranteed, but oversubscribed means that you might not get the funding immediately when you request it. So once we finish design, there's a potential to have a year or two delay while we wait to get to the front of the list in order to acquire that funding. There is still a lot of talk about with the infrastructure money that has been distributed to the state. That hasn't been completely decided on how that will be distributed. So there's potential that they will fund existing programs such as the highway bridge program replacement, the highway bridge replacement program, which would allow that to be fully funded so that that waiting list would be removed. Because we're not the only city in that capacity. There's cities all throughout California, even all throughout Joe Stark Valley, that are hoping to break ground with highway bridge replacement program funding. So
Yeah. Just in general, I mean, in terms of where we're investing, where we continue to invest, it's traffic safety, it's our parks, it's mobility, greenways. And so, obviously you're moving on kind of safe routes to school and making sure that we have good pedestrian protection and people can get to and from school, parks, stores, etc. And I just, our program's pretty good. It's in terms of where we're going and how we're investing. Again, we could do more all the time, right? The money pending, but I think in terms of where we're growing and how we're growing, the city looks completely different, day and night. Well, and I think for the CIP, to me, it's a slam dunk, and we should be able to see $27 million of improvements this next budget year, which would be great.
I agree with the mayor about being very successful in receiving grants, and hopefully we'll be awarded another 50 million this year from the TCC grant for 35 million and the ATP for 15 million, which I'm told that we have a very strong chance of receiving both. And for the TCC grant, the Cochelita Park that the mayor spoke of is added in there. So hopefully if we're awarded those improvements, will be added there, as well as Sierra Vista and many of those greenways and pedestrians. So fingers crossed that we're successful.
Council member Beaman Jacinto, I'm not seeing you on the screen. Any comments on the CIP? Councilmember Galarza. All right, I hear no comments. All right, so let's start. Let's have a thank you for that.
Since I mentioned a lot about grants and you mentioned grants as well, I would also just like to give a thanks to Selena Jimenez, our grants manager, and her efforts towards grants is just indispensable as far as the progress we make working together, getting those grants.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now the budget. Let's get into a conversation about the budget. I wasn't at the study session, but I have had a chance to review the budget and in its entirety. And I'm interested in hearing from my colleagues on their impressions and thoughts on the budget and observations, etc.
I think for me, the concern, and I think it would be for any member of council, is when you're receiving the budget so close to the deadline, then it kind of leaves very little to kind of bring back, if we have questions or, if there's things that we want to be changed or added or removed, it doesn't give us very much time. And so that's where my concern is. And I thank Nathan for giving for the detailed budget today. In the study session, we kind of just received an all reviews, so we really didn't break down into the details either. And so that's just where my concern is.
I share that concern. And I mentioned it at the study session as well. We didn't have a lot of detail provided even at the study session. And it does feel a little bit rushed to be able to request adjustments or really adjust and perfect this budget the way we would like to see it today. And I'll just say what I said at the study session, which is my biggest issue with this year's budget, is that it again contains an enormous increase to the sheriff's department contract, which I know is permissible under the existing contract, but it's troubling to me because I've been requesting a police feasibility study or public safety feasibility study now for over 2 years, and we haven't done it. And I thank Gabriel Martin for getting it in the pipeline. I think that the RFP hopefully will finally go out soon, but it's been 2 years and there's a lot we could have done in those 2 years. It hasn't been done. And I'm hesitant to approve a budget that commits such an enormous increase to the sheriff's department without that information that I've been requesting all this time.
Are there any comments?
What are the, we discussed it in the study session last week, and I know we did remove the license plate reader that we brought up as a concern. And I know the county approved the 7% increase for the sheriff's contract sit on the cities. What is it that I get, because I'm also concerned about any increase to the sheriff contract as well. But what is it that is within our abilities to do within the increases that we're seeing? Or what is it that
I think you are hitting the nail on the head when it comes to the council's concern regarding increases in public safety, not only on the sheriff's side, but on the fire side as well. And that's what happens when you don't have your own PD and your own fire. The only options that we have as a city council is to reduce the hours of service, but even that would be difficult because it would put us in a very precarious public safety position where we may not have enough police officers on the force, and that triggers a bit of an issue. If you talk to the sheriff department and the county executive office, et cetera, their increases are mainly having to do with increases in staffing costs attributed to wages that they're going to get. Sheriffs, they get raise increases, et cetera. So there's not a lot we can do other than to cut services. And I, for one, am not in support of doing that, simply because of the fact that we have 4 officers in our peak and 3 officers in our non-peak. Now we do surge in different times with traffic patrol, et cetera. We do have a gang task force that I'm concerned about right now, just because we've had a couple of shootings, and I've been reading the staff reports, and we've had an increase in shootings. And so trying to change all that and address that is going to be, it's just problematic. And the long-term solution is, hey, Coachella, we can find the money, we can create our own police department, but at this point, we still got to get a 1-year notice and a lot of other things. Just in general, I think that's something, Mr. City Manager, that we're all just concerned about, is like the lateness of the budget. We're used to getting our budget in April, May, molding it over in May, and then kind of moving into June, et cetera. We're about 30 days behind, And, that's something that I think that as we move forward, it's a good thing. Oh, it's not a good thing. We need to address. We need to get back to the way we used to do it. Same thing, I called out the CAFR beginning of the mid-year budget. And so those are all things that I expect to see, and we need to see those things. Now, on the budget itself, I'm very, very pleased of the fact that the city's liquidity is extremely strong. And if you look at how we build our liquidity, I remember we were here a few years where we had like 6 million, 7 million in reserves, and now we're up to 25 million, and 7.3 million of that is discretionary. And so I 17.3 million of that is we're able to move it. So we have a strong just liquidity picture. When I reflect back on last year's budget and this year's budget, I think we put 1.3 million dollars into our liquidity, into our reserves. And so we didn't have a balanced budget last year. We had a surplus. And what I'm being presented today is not concerning, but it's a change in how we've done things here. And here's the thing, and this is where I'm trying to be fair to staff, or at least think of this with staff, is the budget is proposing a structural change in the organization, meaning that the budget is proposing that we add 6 new positions at a cost of about, I think it was 450,000, somewhere in there, roughly in there. And then previously we restructured 4 positions, and then we added 2 new positions. So in total, if this year, 2 this year, 4 next year, well, 6 next, that's 8 new positions. And originally the departments requested 11. Had we give what the departments wanted, we would have got 13 new positions. Now, my concern is that going into, and while I agree with you, Nathan, that we're technically not going into a recession, but the picture of a recession is being painted. And now we do have good liquidity reserves, so we can build our way out of it. My only concern is that if we change our structure and we do go into a recession, it's very difficult. And I don't want to be, or this council shouldn't be in a position where we're having to think about cutting staff. I think we want to be in a position where we're thinking about maintaining the staff that we have. And if is a structural change, that we think about it year after year, kind of a slow structural change. So maybe over 2 years that we add these positions, or maybe even after the mid-year budget review, if the recessionary picture is different, then at that point, we think about, adding 2 positions, et cetera. Now, the question in my book is, how much of reserves should we have? If you look at like the standard practice, they kind of recommend 30% reserves. If we're at 17 million and our budget's 27 million, we're at 25 million in total reserves. Some are restricted, but 17% reserve, that, I don't know, what's the percentage that we're maybe 65% reserves, which is pretty good. So the next question becomes, we can't just continue to tax, or we got to put that money on the street. And so now the thing what's being proposed here is that staff is saying, we want to see that money go to more staff. And I'm wondering if it would be better to do one-time hits to, or the one-time projects to the community, and maybe advance our CIP a little bit more, and then buy staff as opposed to bringing on staff. So in other words, can we contract some of these services that we need? And if the picture looks worse, then at that point, we're just getting rid of services and not getting rid of actual bodies. I think that everybody here that has a job in Coachella should continue to have a job in Coachella, but if we continue to add to our staff and things get worse, then this council should not be in a position where we're going to be cutting staff. And that's not a good picture. So now, what's a little bit just shocking to me a little bit, like, and I think I know why. And I'm talking a lot too, but I've seen the picture of, like, I've been here for a little while. The city we've done really well in getting sales tax. Like our sales tax has gone up consistently. And I know that sales tax projection has come mainly through online sales, not through storefronts, because we haven't added one new storefront. And I think from a state perspective, that might be the new trend where cities are getting returned to their source. So if a city, my house is a perfect example. There are many new boxes that Amazon drops off at my house, and we're seeing that sales tax. But in a recession, more than likely, consumers' ability to purchase is going to fall too. So I think my position here on this budget is, and reading everything and paying attention to everything, is to get a little bit more conservative and not advocate for a structural change of our organization, buy positions if we need them, and then look at mid-year and the picture then, and then maybe add 1 or 2 positions if we need, by then, and get a better clip now. And I would suggest that, that if we're gonna change our approach, which has been to put money in reserves, that we do so in one-time projects and not adding more administration. And I think that's kind of how I'm looking at this, and then at the same time, like, come back to us with a phased structural change and not just 6 positions all at once. I mean, that's just me kind of looking at everything right now and digesting this for the last couple of days. And I don't know, did I make any sense?
Yeah, city manager, I know that there's obviously concerns, and I know, every colleagues asked about not having enough time. Are we able to, maybe right now we use it to have further discussion, and do we have the ability to table the approval of the budget for another month?
Yes, you have the option we can do a special meeting next week, and we can do what's called a continuation appropriation resolution that gives us about another month to look at like a time extension, to look at the budget and look at the organizational structural issues, and give council a little more time to digest the budget.
Yeah, I mean, with that way we could, have some of those conversations. I agree, there's, I agree with a lot of the points that were shared, and concerns, but at the same time, our city's growing. We have a lot of growing demand, and our staff, we need to think about, maybe we also do spend a lot, if we spend money on overtime, right? We need to take those into account, and maybe it is more financially stable to bring an extra body in the table to support some of these, projects that are happening in our city, and support. And by adding staff, we essentially support our residents, because now there's more people to support their services. So, I see that, there was, more, 11 positions were asked, or 12 or some, and about half of them were approved. So I do, think that our staff looked at these diligently, and, didn't approve all 11 or 12 that were initially asked about. But yeah, I'm on board. I think, and then we need to have a discussion. Because I agree with my council colleague, Beeman Jacinto, regarding the increase in the sheriff budget. I just want to know, what is it that we as a city can do regarding it, and maybe that, or I don't know if our city attorney or Nathan or Gabriel can answer that. That way, I know, what is it that we did that attests to the increase in the fees, and what is it that we need to, are there some things that we can reverse without decreasing the patrol time, or all that stuff. So it'd be good if we can have, I guess we could start there too, and having that sort of answer, because I'd like to know, what in a pragmatic manner, what is it that we're actually able to do, given that, again, I called when the county was approving the increase of fees for contract cities with the sheriff, and I opposed it. Unfortunately, it passed. And so it's you know, there wasn't enough opposition from folks in, you know, and from local cities. And so, you know, and so it's just, what is it that we can pragmatically do as a council without, you know, saying, well, we're opposed to it, but, you know, if it, our hands tied, what is it going on there?
And we have our Assistant Chief of Police here too. He can answer some questions.
Well, I'll let our staff, Nathan answer some of that first, and then.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, Nathan, come on up.
And while we're waiting for Nathan to approach, I just want to, you know, add that these precise questions could be answered by the police study that we've been requesting for 2 years, because that study is meant to give us some ideas of either how we could design our own public safety department or how we can adjust, if at all, our investment in the sheriff's department. So.
Right, but we have a month to approve. And I agree, maybe let's do bring that study, and we could have it for the next budget, you know. But, you know, I've been here for a year, and I know, you know, just, we need to approve this in a month, so.
Yes, I think the police contract question, I mean, that would be the way to study it further, because that
Yeah.
we are under contract and we are just paying. We would be actually decreasing our service levels if we were to make any movement on the cost as they are right now. That it's a cost recovery with the county. So if we do that service level, whatever their costs are, we end up reimbursing them for the costs. So that would affect service levels.
Did the city do anything to impact the increase?
No, service levels are exactly the same. There was no change in service levels. So we simply took they do a proposed budget and then they drew it up at the end. So we simply took the proposed budget, same step. They provide, I think it's 3 steps. We took the same structure last year, this year, and used it.
And then just for council's edification here, the sheriff contract on average has increased anywhere from 3 to 5% since 2012, right in there. And so we, you know, the county, what they do is pass through the cost of the service. And so are we paying more for our service? Yes. I think right now we're at 11.34 million. And, you know, we have roughly four officers, 3 at night, and then we buy time depending on incidents, including traffic, etc. And that's up to the discretion of the city manager and how he moves, you know, the patrol. But yeah, but typically, you know, that's what we pay. The question has always been for us is what's the alternative? And maybe now if we conduct this police study, maybe the picture has changed. I don't know that it has, but maybe maybe we can buy service from Indio, or maybe we can create our own. What we don't want to do is ultimately is buy our service or create a service and have less than what we have currently today at a greater cost. So that's what that study can analyze, and we can look at, and if that's something that we had to add to this budget to fund, that's something that I would support, knowing, however, that there's no way that an analysis like that can be done in 3 months, in 30 days. It's going to be more like 6 months. You know what I mean? Because that's pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, that would be something where we need to put the RFP out. We would bring it back. It would be over the threshold. It would come back to you anyway for approval. So
Yeah, I'm also supportive of bringing that forward, you know, as soon as possible. You know, we could, you know, because we don't need to wait till next year. You know, that we can, you know, use it for further determination on how we move forward with this. But it's unfortunate that, you know, we've seen these hikes and our services remain the same. It's unfair to our residents. Yeah. So.
And
But just so that we're aware also is that, you know, once we
we do a study and how we should move forward, whether that decision is to have our own police station, we should also be aware it's going to be a lot of increase of costs. We talked about
Right,
it.
right. But I think the short-term plan it's costly. In the long term, we have more control of the increase, the increases. Right now, the control is with the county, and they approved in 2015 a hike of 7%. Then last year they increased another spike of 5%, and who knows what happened in the next 5 years. It's been increasing quite significantly in the last 10 years. And I know at one point our city did have our own police department, and at that time it was more fiscally conservative to contract out with the county sheriff. But with the increases of fees every year, I'm not sure. And obviously the study will help us understand in the long term. Is it more fiscally conservative to have our in-house department, or look at contracting, as the mayor mentioned, with cities that already have their own police departments?
Yeah, I think maybe you take this time and look at what a feasibility study would look at, and then we add it to the budget. But again, take the next 30 days, we can do a continuing resolution of the current budget. Think about, and here's something to think about too, that if we move to a balanced budget, we start to balance out, and we're not putting money into reserves because we have ample liquidity, and maybe that's fine. But we know that our expenditures naturally have increased, I think, to the tune of like 600,000-700,000 a year. And I'm not sure that our revenue is going to increase to that same tune moving forward. Now, we do have some great indicators, right? Housing is here. We have some good housing going on. We do have some new commercial developments happening, but they're mainly food and grocery. And so that's, again, I'm just wondering if a structural change to the organization is the right move to make, considering the fact that we may be going into recessionary times now. Put together, I definitely want to work with staff, and I want to get staff to what they need, but I'd like to phase it. And then I really want to understand what your true need is within the organization, because this is kind of a shock to me in terms of how we've been nimble, small, getting a lot of things done, and then now it's like we're asking for an increase. Now we are growing. Coachella is growing. There's more residents, there's more need, there's more projects, there's more X, Y, and Z. But I think it's important, Mr. City Manager, that we understand your structural, kind of goal.
I can answer a bit of that. So I know since, I joined, one of the things that I wanted to see is a structural change analysis, because clearly we've been growing. I mean, that's the reality. And so, staff is just, gaining and gaining more of a workload, but really not providing them the support that they need to be successful, to keep those services going to our residents and increase the quality of services, right? Our goal is always to increase the quality of services. And so I did want a structural change analysis. I thought, to be honest, I thought it was going to be a little bit more well planned out. I don't think I was expecting to see 8 positions added within a year. I don't think I definitely would never ask for that, but I did want to see a structural change analysis done first. And so that they can, make sure and kind of guide us is what, and I know that our directors have, shared what positions that they need. And, I know that they need them, they've been needing them, and especially within some departments, but I did think that there was going to be more properly planned. Anytime we're adding these types of fixed costs, right? And it's this many, it does concern me a bit. I know that we do need to add staff. There's no question about it. But I do want to make sure that we're being, thoughtful and that we're not putting ourselves in, some financial trouble in the upcoming years. And very similar to when I asked for, I know that there's a lot of equipment that's dated that needs to be replaced. And so I said, let's have the executive team put a list together and make sure that we're planning it out carefully. So a short-term plan, long-term plan of when we can start, replacing some of this equipment rather than when it breaks down. And then at that point, we just have to take what's available. And so I want to make sure, that we're properly planning and that we're not putting ourselves in a more difficult position. And so I hope that, we have that, in place.
So I'd like to get a little bit of clarification and stuff along these lines so that we can figure out exactly where we're going with it. So these positions, and I think a little bit of background will help so that I understand where we're trying to go. Out of these 11 positions, the ones that were recommended for approval, the 6 that were recommended for approval, those were all positions that had some other cost analysis associated with them. So there was nothing recommended that was part of the structural study aspect of it. These were all positions that, for example, are already being filled by a temporary employee that we have union contracts indicating that we should fill. So all of these had an offset to them of some sort. So it wasn't necessarily that we were trying to just throw 6 extra positions in here. I mean, the cost for the 6 positions, if they were fully costed positions, would be north of $1.2 million.
Yeah.
We're talking about a cost of $450,000 to put the 6 positions on the books because we already have other costs that are contracted out right now. So that's why we didn't take those out of the picture. So as we develop into what we're bringing back or what sort of analysis we're doing, I'm not exactly sure where, what direction we would be going with that. These are the most logical of the.
I think it'd be important to understand what's currently funding those 6 positions if we're already paying for it. And so is it general fund? Is it grants? Is it development impact fees? Is it, so I think maybe getting a little bit more, kind of budget details on the composition of what is funding these positions currently, and then getting a historical picture of how long that's been occurring, that is something that would be appreciated in terms of kind of just giving us the budget, just more detail. And then still, frankly, I mean, it goes back to, do we want to continue to buy those services, or do you want to bring them on? And then my concern is just we're using our liquidity to enhance, the structure of the organization, which may not be a bad thing. It may be merited, but if you think about the 4 that were restructured and the 2 that were added, I'm not sure that we completely got the full picture of the structural change of the organization and where you're headed as a management team. So I just want to kind of understand that generally and just get that full picture. And at the same time, is it worth kind of maintaining the status quo so that we can see, come up November, come December, if we're in recessionary times where ultimately consumer spending is being hit. And then do we know if we're going to see, property tax hits? I don't know. I'm just trying to get a little, we're balanced. That's great. We're not putting money into reserves. We can get out of whack very quickly, based off of, natural increases. And so I want a little bit more of a clearer picture of where you all want to go for the next few years.
So Nathan, currently we're spending about 800,000 for the temps. So if it's for 6 new positions, it makes more sense, by the way, to be 1.2 than the 435,000 that's listed. So the difference between that, well, it's more like 750,000 would be the difference.
There are a lot of moving pieces in it. I know we did go through some of them at the study session. Let me then, if we're gonna do that, let's just put it together in detail. Because not all of them are temp positions that are being filled. There's different purposes to them. So.
And I'll reread it. I'm in support of creating these positions in our city, support staff and services, support our residents overall. So, but with more detail, obviously, so that we can all further discuss in our next meeting. I just want to make sure that, I voice my opinion too on this case.
And just to clarify, this doesn't mean a reduction in services. Services are being rendered. They're happening. This is a matter of, do you contract it or do you bring it in-house? That's simply what's being asked. And we want to know, it's like how big you want to build the house. That's really like to get a clear understanding of that, of where we're going.
Yeah, and as we were discussing in our previous contract service, when we have in-house, we have more capacity to do a lot with the folks that work with us, and we work directly full-time and work directly, in a higher capacity than contracted positions. So that's my opinion on it. So obviously I see that we're not being too liberal on it, and including all 11 positions, we're being our staff, I feel, given the reason that we learned about in the study session and today, that there's some thought and there's some pragmatism why these positions are being selected. So obviously further discuss them, but I'm not opposed to the positions coming in.
I do want to clarify one point on the positions. I'd say 3 of these do address current deficiencies that we do have. In other words, things are starting to back up that are not getting done, that need to be covered. They aren't covered by a temp. So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page.
No, I do completely understand. And to be honest, it's been happening for a while that things have been backed up. It's the reality. And so it's the reason why I knew that we needed to, go to each department and see exactly what is it that they needed. But I also want to make sure that we're just going about it and being financially responsible. However, having said that, we're bringing in it's costing us 435,000 versus what obviously for 6 employees, it's much more than that. And so, I think just a breakdown of those numbers would be very helpful.
Anything else to bring back for clarification?
No, I think we provided enough direction, and we can have a meeting next week to do a continuing resolution. And we'll go from there.
Yeah, and I guess for the sake of transparency, if we can have if you can break down the cost of sheriff's contracts increase over the last 5 years and what has impacted that, showing that it's the fees that the county has approved, and that way there's clarification that we're not adding more services where services remain, but yet we're being charged the same. So just being, we can have some of that, I'm sure you could break down what we paid to the sheriffs in the last 5 years, just so we could, be part of the presentation.
Okay, well, we'll continue this item. Now motion to approve this. Well, continue this item till next week.
Second.
The motion, there's a second. Can we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Beaman Jacinto,
Yes.
Councilmember Delgado,
Aye.
Councilmember Galarza,
Aye.
Mayor Hernandez.
Yes.
Motion carries.
We'll move forward now. on
Mr.
public-
Mayor, it's close to 8 o'clock. You want to do?
All right, well,
public
let's take some public comments. Is there anyone in the public that would like to address the city council? Yeah, welcome.
Good evening, council members. Good evening, Mayor Hernandez, and to the council members viewing and who are present via Zoom. My name is Maria Gill, and I reside at the La Placitas de la Paz community. And I would like to bring to your attention a grave concern pertaining to the several shootings occurring in the city, in particular in this month. According to the Sheriff's Department's call log, there has been 8 shootings between May 1st and June 21st here in the city of Coachella. And according to the United States Census, the recorded population in Coachella as of July 1st of 2021, it is estimated to be 42,554. And therefore, given that Coachella is not a huge city, in my opinion, 8 consecutive shootings within a month is very alarming to me. On June 16th of 2022, about last week, at approximately 9:35 p.m., my children were victims of a drive-by shooting. My daughter, 18, and my son, 16, were coming back from the local pharmacy store, the CVS that is located on Avenue 50 and Van Buren, I believe. And as they were parking on the driveway of our home, coming back, unidentified person drove by and started shooting 11 to 12 rounds from a high caliber pistol. My children have no enemies. Fortunately, my kids were not hit by any of those bullets. My children have no enemies. They are not troublemakers, and they are not affiliated with any gangs. My daughter recently graduated from high school and will be attending college. My son is a respectful high school student who plays piano and trumpet at his school's band, and their lives could have been cut short due to this gun violence occurring in our city and in front of our homes in this month. My questions are, why is it that other nearby cities have a police department and Coachella does not? Back in 2020, Coachella leaders announced that the city is preparing to work in developing its own police department. And I got this from the Desert Sun, an article. And my question is, what happened to that? And I know you guys were discussing this just right now, so you somewhat answered my questions. And also, according to an article on KESQ published this year, Coachella has the lowest coverage of deputies per 1,000 residents, which is 0.64, whereas Palm Desert, La Quinta, and Rancho Mirage all land between 1.9 to 1.59. And I believe Indian Wells is the highest of deputies that patrol that city. And my question to that is, why does Coachella have the lowest coverage? Is there a lack of funds for this coverage? I see there are funds for other projects. For example, in the recent $47.9 million project in Pueblo Viejo's villas, it's a great thing that our city is expanding and growing. But what's the point of a progressive city if the crime is increasing and no progress in controlling the gun violence occurring in the city, and in hopes that it doesn't get worse? My question is, what is being done to keep residents and communities of Coachella safe? What about task force in controlling gun crimes and the sales of illegal dangerous and controlling the sales of illegal dangerous guns here in the city? And the reason why I point that out, according to an article as well of June 18 of 2020 from the Desert Sun, it says that some Coachella officials, elected officials, have advocated for defunding the sheriff's department and removal of gang injunction that has had a positive impact on the quality of life issues in the area and kept residents safe. That's a quote from that I got from the article, and this is the information that I have access to. And therefore, what are you doing to assist all these crimes? And why not invest in more police patrolling? And why should you wait until a tragic death of innocent people happen to put a stop to this? And finally, public safety and the well-being of the city and its citizens should be just as important as other matters, if not the most important. Therefore, what will you and can you do to solve this problem? That's it.
Thank you.
That's all.
Maria Gil, thank you for your being here and for your courage to address us. And I just want to let you know that we were with you and on that unfortunate incident that happened to you. I know I think I received a call from your husband and linked you with Lieutenant, and hopefully Lieutenant we followed up. But we'll have more for you.
Okay.
I think though that these are wonderful questions that you've addressed, you know, and I definitely think that we should have a discussion as well as what's going on and have answers for the community as to what response there is. And I can see it's very upsetting for the family. And so I thank you a great deal for coming forward and having the courage. Thank you so much to the kiddos here. It's very brave for you to be here. And, you know, I just thank you again. But these are wonderful questions that you have brought up. And it's definitely our responsibility to have a response for it.
Okay, and I just want to add that there was other families who were victims in these recent shootings. However, and it turns out one of them was a close friend of mine, but unfortunately she was not able to be here due to she had to work. But like I said, she was also and her family a victim. Luckily, they were inside their home. So yes, this is a very grave. It's very concerning for me, myself, and because I am a resident here in Coachella, and I don't want to have the fear of living in my own home. So yes, if there's any information or if you can answer my questions, I greatly appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there any other speaker to address us? Well, thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much for
hearing me out. And if I sounded nervous, this is my first time
You did wonderful.
attending a council meeting, but I thought it's important.
It is.
Absolutely.
Yes, especially because it's our lives, everybody, every a resident, citizen of Coachella shouldn't have no fear of
Leaving their house.
And I think for more so for parents, I really, I have a young adult and it's frightening. It's frightening when you get phone calls all the time. And so I thank you for your courage. And I hope that, we do bring this forward and have a discussion about what is occurring and have response for our community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Angela, is there any other speaker?
I don't see any hands raised on my end, but I just got back into the meeting and I'm not a co-host, so I think it limits my ability. So if you're able to see anything, I don't see anything.
I don't see any.
There's only 2 attendees.
Yeah, 2 attendees, but I don't see any hands raised. So I think we're good.
All right, we'll move on now to public hearing. This is ordinance number 1195, first reading for zone ordinance amendment number 2203, cannabis business streamlining code amendment to Coachella Municipal Code Title 5 and 7. Mr. Perez.
My screen froze. Can you hear me?
We can hear you fine.
Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. I was over here for a second. Okay, thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. This item before you tonight is an ordinance to amend the cannabis business regulations in the city, and that's Title 5 and Title 17 in the municipal code. This actually was initiated by staff. It's a city initiated request. There was a cannabis action team that was assembled that included various staff from the city. So I want to thank them for their time and providing input in this process. So we looked at the existing cannabis industry in the city, looked at the obstacles that impact the cannabis industry. One of the first steps that we took this year, and you might recall that study session that we had about cannabis businesses in the city of Coachella, was to work on a new tax structure. And the next step was to work on amendments to the municipal code that would help streamline the process for cannabis businesses. So the city first started allowing cannabis in 2016. So we thought it was a good time to look at the code and see where there were barriers to the industry, and to remove those barriers to make it easier for people to do business in the city. So in your staff report, there is an attachment, and I believe it's attachment 7, that has a matrix that identifies what are the different standards and the limits for cannabis uses in the city. So we have about four categories. So we have retail cannabis, that's storefront. A retail, so that's typical dispensary. Retail cannabis, that's non-storefront. So meaning that's mostly like a delivery business, but a customer couldn't walk into the business. And so there is no storefront, no sign that advertises that business. The other is commercial cannabis activity. That's for cultivation, manufacturing, laboratory testing, and distribution. And then the last is something that the council allowed this past year, which is outdoor cannabis cultivation. So we provided this matrix in your staff report to make it easier to understand what the existing regulations are, and then a comparison to what's being proposed with these code amendments. And so we hope that's going to be helpful. So as far as the cannabis program, this map identifies the allowed boundaries for cannabis uses in the city. So you could see there's 3 areas that are labeled the North Employment District in yellow, the Downtown Expansion Area in pink, and the South Employment District in blue. And those are largely our industrial areas in the city. And so we do allow commercial cannabis activity in those 3 areas, but you are required to get a conditional use permit and a change of zone to the industrial park overlay zone. And there's 3 subzones in the city. So you can see subzone 1 by the downtown, subzone 2 by Avenue 48 and Grapefruit Boulevard, and then subzone 3 by Dillon Road. And those are allowable areas for dispensaries in the city. And so they're not, the only other places that they are allowed would be the North Employment District, the downtown, and the South Employment District. And then in the green to the east of the 86 Expressway is the boundary where outdoor cultivation of cannabis is permitted with the conditional use permit, and there's specific standards for that. So looking really close at the subzones. So this is the subzone 1 in the Pueblo Viejo area. And so there are cannabis dispensaries that are allowed in that area. And just going back to the staff reports at that time, it looked like this area was established as a way to encourage new businesses in the area and to facilitate some growth along Grapefruit Boulevard. So the second is the subzone 2. So the code currently allows up to 2 dispensaries in this zone, which is between Grapefruit Boulevard, Van Buren Street, and bounded to the north by Avenue 48. And the third subzone is the Dillon Road area, which is along Dillon Road between the I-10 and the 86 Expressway. And then the wrecking yard zone, where dispensaries are allowed with the conditional use permit, as well as commercial cannabis businesses. And then this is the industrial park area that it's considered the industrial park overlay. So in this area, which is largely a heavy industrial area, potential cannabis businesses do have to apply for a zone change to manufacturer's service zone and do have to apply for a zone change for the industrial park overlay. Here's a map that identifies the approved dispensary locations in the city. And so the municipal code allows for up to 10. And here are the status of those different businesses. Actually, it lists 9. The 10th one was a business that it was identified as Roots. And so we are still working on identifying where that location of the Roots would be. So the final CUP was not approved for that business. But here's the status of the dispensaries. So there's 4 businesses that are currently open. There are 2 businesses that expired, and that includes Kismet and the Greenhouse business. And then there are 2 others that are in construction, and that's Libra and the Coachella Canna Club. One is in plan check right now, and that's Pueblo Cannabis. And so I anticipate probably by next year, there would be 7 operating dispensaries in the city. So this is just a look at where some of those businesses are. So Coachella Canna Club by the 10 freeway, you may recall, that is under construction, and some of the dispensaries in the downtown area that are either in plan check or operating or under construction. And in the industrial park area, there's 2 cannabis, commercial cannabis businesses that were approved, 1 dispensary. And then the auto wrecking zone, where a lot of our commercial cannabis businesses received approvals from the city, and they're at different stages. Either they're approved and under construction, or have completed work. And then the lighthouse. So as far as the proposed amendments, this is what's recommended to the city council, is to remove the requirements for commercial cannabis or retail cannabis applicants to pursue a zone change to apply the retail cannabis RC overlay or the industrial park IP overlay zone. So if you want to open a dispensary, you have to apply for a zone change. But in addition to the zone change, you also need to apply for a conditional use permit. The zone change always means that the dispensary or the commercial cannabis business requires approval by the city council. If we didn't have that requirement, the only approval that would be needed is a conditional use permit at the planning commission. And so we think it makes sense to remove that requirement for that change of zone. The next amendment would eliminate the subzones that I showed you. So I showed you 3 subzones where retail cannabis businesses could be permitted. And they're very targeted areas where they would be permitted, and instead actually be more flexible where they could be located. And this would be our commercial zones in the city, our neighborhood commercial, general commercial, and our tourist commercial zone. They would still require conditional use permit approval by the planning commission, and would still be subject to the limitation of 10 dispensaries in the city. And we think this will allow for greater flexibility for these businesses. And how does this compare to other cities? Well, here's a matrix that compares Palm Springs, Cathedral City, Desert Hot Springs, and Coachella. So in terms of permitted locations, you can see that Palm Springs does allow it in most zones in the city, particular commercial and industrial zones, and that's dispensaries. And then the other city that's more permissive is also Desert Hot Springs, which is their downtown and visitor zones and the commercial district. So us making these changes would be comparable to what two other cities have done. And here are all the commercial zones in the city. So instead of the subzones that are located here in purple, and here in blue, it would actually make dispensaries eligible in all of these red areas in the city. And there's not existing commercial centers in all these zones. Some of these are vacant properties. but others do have some commercial centers where a dispensary could potentially locate. The other proposed amendments would be for commercial cannabis activity, as I explained, manufacturing, distribution, testing. So right now, what would be required is in the industrial parks, if you are zoned heavy industrial, it does require you to change your zone to manufacturing service. Now, that requirement never made any sense to me. You know, why couldn't a commercial cannabis business locate in a heavy industrial zone? And why would it have to change to the manufacturing service zone? So a lot of business have had to go through the process for a change zone to be able to change from heavy industrial to manufacturing service. But in addition to that, they also have to get approval of a conditional use permit. And so instead, what we would do is also eliminate the need to be in those sub areas that I identified. And so therefore, a commercial cannabis activity could occur in any manufacturing service zone in the city. Currently, commercial cannabis activity is only allowed in manufacturing service zone properties, as I mentioned, and those 3 subzones sub areas that I mentioned, sub area 6, 7, and number 10. And then maintain a 600-foot distance requirement from residential zoned lots. There's a conflicting requirement for our industrial park zone, which states that these businesses would have to be at least 1,000 feet away. So there's that discrepancy, and we think it makes sense just to go ahead with the 600-foot distance requirement. So what would that look like in terms of distance from existing residential zones? So all this area in yellow is actually the residential zones in the city, and there's a 600-foot buffer placed around it. So commercial cannabis activity could not occur in any of these yellow areas, right? That's manufacturing, that's testing, that's distribution. And so they would be able to locate in areas that remain, right? So here are the zones that they would be allowed: manufacturing service, heavy industrial, and auto wrecking. So they would still be allowed in the auto wrecking zone in areas near the permit center south of Avenue 52, but largely would be prohibited in the downtown expansion area. But there would be new opportunities in our existing heavy industrial zone that's east of the 86 Expressway that's largely vacant. The other is to remove the requirement for a development agreement for retail cannabis businesses. So we have this requirement in the municipal code that you either apply for a conditional use permit or a development agreement, and staff did review the development agreements that have been approved for commercial cannabis businesses and dispensaries, and determined that the main reason for the development agreement was to secure taxation rates from those businesses. But we no longer need to do that if we have a citywide taxation rate. But there weren't any other special benefits that the city was able to obtain through those development agreements. And therefore, we thought it didn't make sense to be able to go through that process with the developer if we mainly were trying to establish the tax structure. The other amendment is to eliminate the 250-foot paved street frontage requirement and the 5-acre lot restriction. And so in this map, I identify properties that have frontage that's less than 250 feet or that are less than 5 acres in size. And so that restriction didn't make a lot of sense. And we've actually had to prove a lot of variances for businesses that did propose projects on properties that did not meet those requirements. So the other amendments is to expand the timeframe for a conditional use permit and an architectural review. So usually a cannabis business would need to apply for a conditional use permit. And if they are proposing a new building, they go through the architectural review process. Those two processes get reviewed by the Plan Commission. Right now, our process is that they expire after 1 year. But that's often difficult to be able to get your construction documents ready, to go through plan check and to begin construction. And many times applicants have to get extensions for their project. So we think it makes sense to allow for 2 years. We looked at other cities surrounding us, like Quinta and Indio. They allow for a 2-year expiration timeframe for conditional use permits. And similar to our architecture review, development review permits. And with the recommendation from our city attorney is establish more defined procedures for revocation of a conditional use permit and architecture reviews that are when we experience businesses that are out of compliance with their conditional use permits. The other thing that we were looking at was currently our outdoor cannabis cultivation ordinance allows for a maximum of a 4-year term, and you could renew it after 4 years. But we received feedback that interested parties that there wasn't a lot of certainty there, and they wanted a longer time frame. And so, we inquired of the Plan Commission if they were open to having a 12-year time frame, but they did not make a recommendation to change the ordinance to allow for a 12-year time frame. And that's the end of my presentation. Staff's recommendation is to introduce the ordinance that's prepared for first reading to amend Title 5 and Title 17. That's the end of my staff report. I'm happy to answer any questions. And just to remind you that there was a letter that was submitted for public comment, and that relates to a potential business that wants to do indoor cannabis cultivation in the outdoor cannabis cultivation zone and wants us to study the ability for us to incorporate those standards. They were recommending a continuance, but staff still recommends that the council approves the ordinance tonight.
Okay, thank you. This is pretty meaty. I will open up the public hearing at 8:19. Is there anyone that would like to address the city council? Item. I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing on this item. Council, this is very, very meaty, Gabe. Obviously we're undergoing an effort to change the way the city has traditionally handled this. I think for me, I'm generally in support of the recommendations, with the exception of the retail cannabis, just because there was a lot of effort that went into the current zones. And so I'm just, if we have 10 allowed permits and there's 7 that are moving forward and 2 more potentially that may be coming, that would leave 1 person or 1 application open to going into these new zones. And so I'm, these new zones are attractive, right? I mean, they have more, there's more car traffic and more car counts. But yet at the same time, when we initiated this, I think that's the council didn't want to see retail cannabis on the Cesar Chavez Boulevard, Harrison, back in the day. But so that's how I feel. I mean, I think it's good, with the exception of just the retail cannabis portion and changing that zone from the retail cannabis area.
There'll be more than just one, right? Because we have a lot of the ones, a lot of the applicants that have received, license in the first phase and they haven't even opened. Are we gonna renew all those, or they're gonna come up again? I mean, we still need to decide as a city, but why is the staff recommending that we expand the zone that we currently have?
The rationale behind that was to make the city of Coachella a little more competitive. like other cities have indicated, they've allowed it in their commercial zones, Palm Springs, that are hot springs. We feel that, putting them all in one area would cannibalize each other. Putting like liquor stores next to each other, any specific business next to each other has its pros and cons. So we realized that there was going to be two more. There are two currently expired dispensaries. When we go out for a third round, we wanted to give them more options, kind of look at older buildings that probably need to be rehabbed, new construction, and so forth. So our rationale was to open up more zones to allow more opportunities and more competition, and to allow it quickly. Now that the city of Indio has entered the dispensary, our biggest competition just entered the dispensary game. So we wanted to try to make it streamlined, less competitive, less restrictive, and with more options, so we can get them open before our competition does.
City manager, given that, in Sixth Street, for instance, here, we had two dispensaries that were rehabbing old buildings, and one of them is an eyesore right in the corner, and the other one, the business partners sort of broke apart here, down the street, and it's not, if there's some work inside, they're no longer doing it. How supportive are, staff moving forward in allowing for, what happened right here in Sixth Street and Grapefruit to happen again, where these folks just broke apart that building, and I know it wasn't the best looking building before, but now we have all these patches there, and they're not even moving forward yet. So would we allow that to continue, or is there concern that might continue to happen? What are some thoughts in if we approve this new revision? What are we doing as a city to further prevent these messes happening?
When we get their conditions, we can set strict timelines, get performance matrix, have them perform. If not, then we can have their license revoked if they don't meet a certain timeline within the schedule. We can make sure we add that to prevent that from happening. That is an eyesore, and we worked with that dispensary, and now finally they're in construction, so they are going to hopefully open by the end of January is their time frame. So, but yeah, we would for the third round look at that and try to prevent that from happening again.
Councilmember, maybe one suggestion, because I think the intent was good, right? To rehab a historic building and then to allow for construction of a new building. But maybe some of the criteria the next round could consider, being able to open in an existing tenant space that already exists and allow someone to open up as soon as possible.
Yeah, because I think we were one of the first cities to start allowing dispensaries, and sort of a lot of these dispensaries took a long time to even get there. And so, but we could be some more. I think one thing too is that we could look at when we've been supportive of local investment, like Coachella Smoke or Coachella Relief, and those open quite fast, because it's, we have local people that, so I'm also, very supportive of when we open a second, this third round, then we also prioritize in the point system, having more locals benefit from this rather than, outside groups.
That's, council member, that's not what was being discussed here about the grading system, et cetera. What's being discussed here is a huge change to the retail cannabis zones.
Yeah.
And to me, this is an issue of fairness. When we first started round one, round two, we said these are the zones, and now what's being proposed is to drastically change the zones. Well, if I'm on the Grapefruit corridor where my traffic count is 30,000 cars a day, and somebody that now can go into Cesar Chavez corridor where the traffic count is 80,000 or 100,000 cars a day, where's the visibility in terms of where the business is going to go? And while the city manager may be talking about the motivation here is for maximizing the benefit of city revenue, I think that's cool, and keeping into competition with other cities that are opening up, there's an issue of fairness of people that have traditionally played by the rules from round one, round two, and now we're offering a drastic change for more visibility, and those folks could, new folks or other people could go into those zones. So are we going to allow the peoples that are currently in Grapefruit Boulevard to relocate, to the corner of Avenue 48 in Jackson, where you're on the city line between Indio and La Quinta, and very favorable for, you on that corner? I mean, if we're going to say, hey, let's open it up, then let's open it up to everybody. Let them move their permits if they want to, or let them move their licenses in order for them to compete in general. Or are we going to say, no, just stay there. You won your zone and you're good.
That is an option if you'd like us to take that into consideration. We can allow current licensees to move around different locations as these new zones open up. If they want to be more competitive or choose a different location that would be more profitable for them. But as you indicated, Mary, our approach is to maximize profits, revenues for the city, and we feel this is the best approach. You do bring up good concerns about the equity, but we feel that our goal right now is to increase revenues and increase our dispensaries to 10 to meet the city council's goals.
Would not only allow them to apply to relocate, but is there anything against having them apply for a second license in the city?
Gabe, is there any restrictions to?
The municipal code doesn't have any restrictions at all. And so there's two different restrictions that could happen, right? The municipal code, which doesn't have any restrictions there, and whatever the council establishes for the criteria for allowing applicants to apply for the dispensary permit.
So at the moment, there's no restriction, just.
No.
So I know that we've discussed this before, and I don't know if it was an economic development subcommittee meeting, but I also disapprove of going large. I was part of the initial creating of the zones, and the mayor does bring up a good point. We did put a lot of effort and detail into where they were strategically placed. But I'm also thinking of, you're comparing it to Palm Springs. Palm Springs is a lot further, developed than the city of Coachella. We're a very dense community. We're not that large. And so, I don't necessarily approve of having, dispensaries all up along Cesar Chavez Street either, and that was one thing that we really took into consideration. So, I prefer the subzones. I also don't think our residents are going to be open to having, dispensaries, opening up on Cesar Chavez. Even though they're approved in the city, we still have, a lot of families that are opposed. And so that's a big jump for them. So I've shared my sentiments before about going large, and I also don't approve of going large that way. I mean, if there's someone who wants to maybe open up in an area outside the zones, of course they can go before, the development department, and then you can see if that's maybe a place that's suitable. But I don't agree with opening up at large. And it's also not as easy, for some of those who already have permits and have already gone through the process. They've already invested a lot of money, and it's not as easy just to kind of get up and go and select now another location because it's opened up. I also agree with the Planning Commission about the 14-year. Is it 14-year?
12-year.
Can you?
12-year.
Yeah. Can you? Do you have a slide where it shows all the proposed amendments so we can kind of review them all at once?
Yes, I'll share my screen. So outdoor cannabis is down here, and it talks about.
Can you share your screen, Gabe?
Oh, I'm sorry, it hasn't shared yet.
No.
Sorry about that. Okay, sorry about that. So outdoor cannabis cultivation is down here that I'm pointing to. These are all the requirements. So it has to be 1,000 feet from a school, daycare, or youth center. These are the zones. And that boundary that we identified has to be at least an acre in size. And but what's not on here is the time frame. So currently in the code, the time frame is 4 years.
With an authorized review.
But the way that the code is worded, someone could technically come back and request from the plan commission that they renew for another 4-year term.
So I prefer that, just coming forward. I mean, I understand some of the outdoor grows are concerned, but having, I don't know if it was 12 years or 14 years. I don't quite understand why they can't just come forward and ask for the renewal. I mean, if everything's operating correctly, I can't see why there would be a denial of that. The only way I would say a denial of that is maybe if there's housing developments going up nearby it, but other than that, I can't see, denial of any renewal. I do have another question about the retail cannabis storefront and then the retail cannabis non-storefront. And then just the reasoning for why some have 500 feet from a storefront retail or non-storefront, and then 100 feet from residential structure, and then the other has none.
I don't know why that's in the code. I could only speculate that for non-storefront retail can locate in any commercial zone right now in our municipal code, right? It's not restricted like storefront dispensaries. So because they're not restricted, then the only the restriction we do have in place is that they have to at least be 500 feet from each other. And I believe that probably helps prevent overconcentration so that you don't have, a whole bunch of non-storefront businesses occupying all the tenant spaces in the commercial center.
And then for retail cannabis, I mean, we're restricted regardless because we can only issue 10.
Correct.
The overlays, I understand why it would make it easier to remove the requirement of doing the overlay zone. And if you can explain to me the removal or the allowing of the 24-month expiration for CUP.
Okay. Yeah. And this really comes from experience, seeing some of the dispensaries trying to open up. So a lot of them have had to apply for 1-year extensions because they're good for 1 year. Yes. And so why do we have a 1-year time frame, right? Is it because we think that's enough time for them to get their construction plans prepared, approved by the city, and to have a permit in hand to begin construction? Because it's very difficult to do that in a year. We haven't really seen anyone able to do that. And so, just doing a comparison, to surrounding cities, it does allow for more of that flexibility and maybe more of that certainty for a business to feel that, they're not under the gun or they may lose their permit, right?
They have three extensions, right? So.
Yeah, you can apply for 3 1-year time
Not
extensions.
1 year, it's 3 years. So
correct.
It's just renew, send the renewal, and that's pretty much.
But it's process, right? They have to come in front of the legislative body. They have to.
So basically the CUP would be allowed to expire for 2 years?
Yeah, after 2 years, it would expire. But after that, we would still allow for extensions, the 1-year extensions that are currently in place.
And and then the expiration, would that just be for cannabis related businesses?
No, so that's another thing that I need to point out is that this wouldn't just relate for cannabis. So we could restrict it just for cannabis businesses, but this would apply across the board. for any kind of new development or any use that needs a conditional use permit.
I mean, I am a bit concerned about not holding, sometimes it's just, when we do that 1 year review, whether we want to make it 2 years, it just, I just recall them coming forward and it always gave us an opportunity to ask where they're at, and when are we going to see that development go up? And so if we're allowing a 2-year expiration on a CUP across the board for all developments, then that accountability that we used to have is now just been completely removed. I mean, how do you guys feel about the across the board CUP?
I think with respect to this industry, it's very cost prohibitive. It's very heavy to be able to fund these projects, do the improvements, ensure that legally you're getting through the process with the state, and then try to meet that 1-year time frame. Even more so now with the state adjusting a lot of its recommendations and processes. And so I don't think that most applicants, unless they're extremely well funded, and are going to be able to meet that 1 year. I mean, most of them have it. And if we have goals where we're trying to ensure that the social equity applicants are being considered, then I think a 2-year CUP is reasonable, just like other cities grant folks, and then you add the extensions behind it. I mean, 1 year CUP, 1 year CUP, like we go back and back and back. It takes time, it takes money. Absolutely, with respect to accountability, but at the same time, like, when people apply to these things, it's very expensive, very, very expensive. And councils may change, and in 1 year, the decision can get thrown out because the council changed, and there's no certainty. And
So then are we saying a 2-year CUP, or then allowing it to expire for 2 years? I mean, for me, a 2-year CUP makes a bit more sense than allowing it to expire for 2 years.
I think what you're recommending, Gabriel, is what, 2 years?
Expiration.
And then with the ability to continue 1 year after that and 1 year after that, for a total of 4 years versus what
Total of 5 years. You can get
5 years.
extensions.
So 3 extensions. What currently exists now is just 1, 2, 3 years extensions. So I'm working with the development community to try to get some of these things done. I think it's a
So
good
what I'm
recommendation.
asking is that then Gabriel, are other cities allowing, I know a lot of cities have a 2-year CUP. So what I'm asking is that, because what you're proposing is a 2-year, is to allow the expiration of a CUP for 2 years. And so wouldn't it make more sense just to possibly allow for a 2-year CUP?
Yeah, so their CUP is considered active for 2 years, right? And then what will vest it is if they get their permit, they're under construction, and they're diligently doing construction. So that's what we're recommending, right? So if nothing happens for the applicant in those 2 years, and basically that CUP expires.
And then that's 1 year extensions to 3.
1 year extensions, yeah.
Thank you for that explanation.
Gabriel, we did receive a letter. I did review that letter about asking you to review kind of the outside cannabis overlay. I think that's fair. I'm in agreement with them to kind of look at that and see if we can accommodate or try to fix what we currently do have. Particularly because of its location, it's out there.
Yeah, Mayor, we would look for direction from city council if, you want to kind of grant their request, which they're looking at. They're looking for council to continue the item and for the city staff to study it more and maybe consider what they're trying to do, which is indoor cultivation in that area.
In the commercial cannabis area.
Yeah. So we don't necessarily have opinion on whether it's a good idea or not. We haven't studied it at this point. So we don't have a recommendation for that at this time.
We're just simply asking you to review. That's fair. Okay, council, what are your sentiments? What are your wishes? Is there direction? I personally, I'm good with the changes and modifications that are being proposed, with the exception of the retail cannabis section. I'd like to strike that whole section and leave it as is. And then everything else with respect to retail cannabis, non-storefront, commercial cannabis activities of outdoor cannabis cultivation, go ahead and allow for those modifications. But if there's another motion, and if there's areas that we want to amend, then I will welcome those motions.
I'll second your motion, if that's a motion, Mayor.
Okay, there's a first and a second. Is there any more discussion? And then just keep in mind that I believe it's only us three. I'm not sure if Councilmember Jacinto is still on. But we would need a vote of everybody to order to pass this in the affirmative.
Mayor, can I get some input and clarification? So is it for retail cannabis, more concerned about the flexibility in the zones? Because there's a couple other changes that were requested for storefront dispensaries. So the other is that we're recommending that an overlay zone not be required. And so just a conditional use permit.
To me, that's fine. That's fine. I think where I'm more concerned with is changing the zones throughout the city to be more permissive in all of the retail zones. But if we want to just move forward on the overlay, then I think that's to eliminate the overlay on new processing. That's fine.
In the subzones.
In the subzones.
Yeah, so basically what we're saying is if you're in the overlay zone already, you don't have to apply a zone onto your property, because we can revoke the conditional use permit, but we can't revoke the zoning designation, right? So
I'll amend my motion to include that portion of staff's recommendation regarding the overlay provision.
I'll second the motion with the amendments made.
Okay, there is a roll call. There is a motion in a second. Can we get a roll call?
Yes, I'll go ahead and take roll. I just have a question. Did we open and close the public hearing? Did I miss that? Yes, okay, I'll just go back and review that. Okay, so I'll take roll. Councilmember Beeman Jacinto. I do believe she's off. Okay, Councilmember Delgado.
Yes.
Councilmember Galarza.
Aye.
Mayor Hernandez.
Aye. Motion carries. We'll move on now to public comment.
Mr. Mayor, allow me to read the title of the ordinance to the record. It's an ordinance of the Council City of Coachella, California, amending Coachella Code chapters 5.69, 17.24, 17.26, 17.28, 17.30, 17.32, 17.34, 17.46, 17.47, 17.72, 17.74, 17.84, 17.85 regarding cannabis business zoning and operation in the city and conditional use permit procedure. Thank you.
All right, we'll go on to public comments. We already went to that. We'll go to reports and requests. I will start on my right. Councilmember Galarza.
Nothing to report.
Start to my left now. Go to my left.
So over or throughout the week, we met with the Food for Less small business community and their concerns about shootings that are occurring in that plaza. And so one of the things that we're going to be reviewing is special event permits after learning that many of our businesses who have these types of events don't currently have any current or any special event permits. So that's going to be coming before the Public Safety Subcommittee to review. Additionally is that, and I had made these comments before in the Economic Development Subcommittee meeting, and it's just in the same way, in the same manner that we dedicate all this time, to the dispensary or to the cannabis industry about how we streamline things and how we make things easier, that we also do this for the small business community. So, I asked for this to come back to the Economic Development Subcommittee meeting so that we can review, what the process is for someone who wants to get a small business here in the city of Coachella, and ways that we can make it easier for them. So I hope to see that come back soon. And outside of that, I don't have any other comments.
All right, well, this is a little bit of a long meeting, but it was meaty. A lot of good stuff to go over. Next Monday is the CVAG Executive Committee or the CVAG General Assembly. And looks like I'm going to be nominated as the chair of the Coachella Valley Association of Government and the vice chair. And so I will be the chair of the CVAG Executive Committee. We have been, just to follow up on some of the infrastructure deals, we've been in communication with our Caltrans director, District 8 director, to try to get support for the Avenue 50 bridge, as well as Ann Mayer and RCTC, to get them to back our application. A lot of the times this becomes a bit political, and you got to get letters of support. And the good thing is that the county supervisor has been supportive of our efforts here in Coachella. I want to just take the time to acknowledge the work of our staff regarding the TCC, the Transformative Community Change application, and acknowledge all the partners who have been part of this effort. That effort began in 2016 when we applied for the planning grant, and then we found out that we weren't able to actually apply for the implementation grant, and now we are. And I think we have a great opportunity to try to get, $35 million for the city. It is going to be competitive. There are a lot of cities that are applying. I know India is applying, and I know that other regions in the Coachella Valley, in the state, are going to be applying. So just if we don't get it, and because I know it's due in July, these efforts are not in vain. Hopefully we can reapply. And same goes to the, active transportation. We've done pretty good as a city in getting active transportation dollars, and those are highly competitive. Now, the good thing is that there is a lot of money. I want to just let council know too that I've been following staff's work regarding the LAFCO Sphere of Influence proposal, and I've been actually reaching out to a number of different elected officials who sit on the LAFCO board, because staff's administrative approval from LAFCO is not favorable to the city of Coachella, and we want to make sure that the elected officials know the clear picture of why it is that we are taking the position that we are. For those who don't know, back in 2006, LAFCO changed our sphere of influence dramatically when they shifted our sphere from what would be Jefferson to 54. And they gave that all to Vista Santa Rosa, or the city of La Quinta. And then as a result, they said, oh, Coachella, you're gonna get all this new area, basically up in the mountains where you can't even develop a home. So anyhow, we're trying to rectify that. Tomorrow's a hearing at 8:30, and I will be in attendance as well with staff. Wish us luck. All in all, a lot of good things still happening in the city. I appreciate all the work from staff, and those are my comments, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only update I have is a reminder that the Coachella 4th of July event is July 1st, Friday at Bagduma Park. Hope to see everybody there. So
Coachella what?
the Coachella 4th of July event. And that's all.
It's on a Friday,
Yeah, it's a Friday, July 1st.
which is great, because then you wanted to leave for the weekend, you still could.
Yeah. So it's good. It's gonna be a good weekend.
Very, very good. All right, you guys, we are adjourned.